we are thrilled to have over here as we dive into one of the most dynamic subjects shaping the 21st century. I'm Nikhil Pan and I will be moderating today. Joining us is Dr. Ritu Sharma, an expert in the Cambridge Global Perspective and a dedicated resource person at Collins. She will be sharing her insights on how we can make GP more engaging, relevant, and impactful for students and educators. So before we get started, feel free to drop on your questions into the comment actions. What we'll be doing, we'll be addressing all those questions towards the latter stage of our webinar. So good evening, ma'am. And before we start, let's first introduce the subject of global perspective. What we're going to do is, how we're going to break down this session is, after we invited teachers to submit their questions, their queries, their challenges for global perspective, we got somewhere around 250 responses, somewhere around 250 questions where teachers share their queries and their challenges. So what we did, we subgrouped those questions into 5 basic themes, and we will be going towards those questions through those themes. The first theme which we want to cover today is basic introduction of global perspective. So my first question, Dr. Ritu, let's begin with the foundation. What is Cambridge Global Perspectives and why is it crucial for 21st century learners?
Yeah. So, hi everyone, hi Nikhil. So, Cambridge Global Perspectives is a skill-based subject which is not content-based, but it is skill-focused and aims to make learners aware about the global and local issues around them and develop the much needed 21st century skills in these young learners. So the beauty of this subject is that it can be interdisciplinarily taught. It is transdisciplinary because the topics are from across various subjects.
Right.
And it also aligns very well with the project-based learning, expeditionary learning, experiential learning paradigms that schools are now following.
Correct.
More and more.
And that's something which we have been seeing a lot of schools,
Yes.
experiential learning. So I just wanted to understand beyond academics, as nowadays, as you rightly mentioned, that nowadays schools are getting more into experiential learning. So beyond academics, what do you think in terms of a subject like global perspective, what are the long-term benefits which global perspective offers to students in developing critical thinking skills?
Yes, so global perspectives, as I shared, is a skill-based subject, and those skills, we know that Cambridge revises its curriculum every 5 years. So it's not only the current use that is important within the classrooms, but also the vertical alignment with what is the requirement in senior grades, which can be across any board. So what are the requirements in senior grades? For example, time management, collaboration, organization skills, networking skills, which are required by senior school students to address issues in the society, get to know other people, become more aware generally as citizens. And when they apply to colleges and they have to write their SOPs, applications, all of those things, then they have so much more to write about.
Correct.
They are so much more aware of their surroundings. They are so much more able to deep dive into these topics in their interviews also.
Correct,
with
yeah.
the colleges. So after college also, these skills stay with them. So these skills, as they grow older, they join organizations, they start their own businesses, whatever they do in life, so these become their life skills.
Correct. And I guess this would be the right time to specify that there are certain basic skills what global perspective tries to equip students.
Yes.
So I'm sure like a lot of practicing global perspective teacher would already be knowing it, but there are a lot of other teachers who might be first time global perspective teachers. There are also a lot of schools who are planning to adopt global perspective. So would you mind just sharing once that what are those skills, like the skills which...
So the skills which run across subjects, across boards,
Right.
and vertically as well as horizontally, are skills like research, analysis, evaluation, critical analysis, reflection. So
Right.
metacognition skill is one of the most important skills nowadays,
Right.
to equip the learner in knowing how to learn.
Correct.
So how do I learn? What
Yeah.
is my way of learning? In which situation I will learn best? So metacognition skill is there in GP.
Right.
So there are reflections in other subjects also, but GP has a full component allocated to it. So
Right.
not only as children, but even as adults, it is a very useful skill. So these are the skills: communication, collaboration. These are the skills which are specifically addressed by GP, and then they sort of branch out into those life skills later
Correct.
on.
And we have seen that, right, with the recent NEP, with the government of India, they put a lot of emphasis on skill building rather than topic. And at the same time, I was just reading very recently the World Economic Forum, a report by World Economic Forum, and they mention over there that in the next 10 years, the the job requirement would be totally skill oriented. So, and these are the skills which they have mentioned.
Yes.
So right now our learners, the 21st century learners, it's very, so that's where when I speak about that, what are the long term benefits, and thank you so much for specifically talking about these long term benefits. Now, after understanding the basics and introduction of global perspective, now what we do is that we move to the second strand, which we have designed as per the questions, which is about, and this is something very important because this is about teaching strategies and classroom integration. Like I've already mentioned that we do have today a lot of first time teachers who are teaching global perspective, teachers who have never taught global perspective before, they are teaching for the first time, a lot of teachers who have been teaching different subjects in different manner, and they have been asked to teach global perspective. So these questions are coming from them. So how can teachers make global perspective a daily part of classroom learning while ensuring students consider diverse viewpoints without any bias? So great. So as you were saying, that's a beautiful point that global perspective as subject is compatible with all the other subjects.
Yes.
And that's the point. And that's actually it's a good segue to the second question which was asked, that what innovative strategies, which you have already mentioned, what innovative strategies can help students connect to their learning with the real world global challenges, which you already mentioned. But when we talk about, let's say, current global challenges, and at the same time the CIA, the entire syllabus, the topics which are covered over there, so let's talk about topics like SDGs. So how do you think global perspective teachers can integrate this worldly issues like while sustainable development goals and bring them into their classrooms through global perspective?
Yes, see, it's not an innovative strategy, it's an age-old strategy that learners will learn best if they take the ownership of their own learning. Right. So it is always best to pick up a topic. For example, if I'm taking sustainability, right. Sustainability is an overarching theme, and then I want to integrate it with the SDGs. Suppose I'm a science teacher, I take the nuclear energy debate. I can use an interesting video or a case study as a hook, right, to make my learners interested in that lesson. And then probably I'll throw it open to the learners themselves to identify issues which they are interested in exploring, right, so that they feel that they take the ownership of their own learning. They feel that this is something they are more, they can relate with more. And then that is when it becomes a student-led classroom rather than a teacher-dictated classroom. Right. So some classroom protocols or strategies that can be used for this are, for example, there can be so what I have practiced in the past is something known as an observation walk. Okay. So what we do is we organize an observation walk. So first adults do it. So maybe 2 or 3 teachers will go on an observation walk. So suppose I have taken sustainability, and on my way to school or maybe near some society, I have observed there is some garbage collection or some dumping or something like that happening. So I will chalk out a sort of a map, a road, a path, which should be taken where these issues are clearly visible. Right. So first the adults will do that, maybe 2 or 3 teachers can do that, and then take the children on that path. Right. Let them observe what is happening, note down the observations. Correct. So what they observe, and then when they come back to class, from that observation what they infer. Right. And then they should themselves, I hope, by that time they're enthusiastic enough
Right.
to be, and they are ready enough to do something about it. So this is just one of the techniques. The key idea in GP being the more children are exposed to what is happening around them, like
Right.
physically they encounter these things, the better.
Right.
So this can also be reversed. We can also bring experts into the
Correct.
classroom. So expert sessions are a wonderful way of conducting GP lessons.
Right.
So experts may not always be scientists or professors or such experts
Correct,
from
yeah.
outside. Experts can also be the older students in the school.
Right. Right.
So suppose your student congress has done something, maybe grade 11 or 12 students have taken some initiative, maybe the school administration has taken an initiative of reducing waste during lunchtime, or reducing junk food in the cafeteria.
Cafeteria.
So those people can also be brought as experts. So
Right.
whatever ways it works for the school setups, either take the children on a observation walk or call the experts in the class.
Right, absolutely. Like I guess in the theater and the drama sector industry, there's a like age-old saying that the world is a stage. I guess over here it's like the world is your classroom.
Yes.
So you can just. So now what we're gonna do is that we're gonna go into more specifics, and rightly as you mentioned that students will need to do all of these observation. We'll come to the first skill, which is research, right? And when we are expecting students to do this research, I mean research, when I'm just expecting a 8 or 9-year-old child hearing the word research, because research is a very strong headed word. Like the first time I heard the word research was during my graduation. So we come from that that kind of education. So now over here we are expecting primary school students to do research. So the first question, the question related to research, which is very interesting, is that what interesting research tasks can be assigned to primary school students to develop inquiry-based learning from an early age?
Yes. So that is a very good question, and it is one of the most common questions
Right.
asked. And to answer this question, I'll have to first clarify that there's a difference between research as a skill and searching for information.
Absolutely.
So searching for information is just very small part of this skill. So my suggestion would be for teachers to map out what all skills within research you want to teach. So that can be mapped out age-wise. For example, research process is very clear because research process is same in all the subjects.
Exactly.
So it's like you formulate a hypothesis, so you identify an area of research, formulate a hypothesis, do some secondary research, do some primary research, devise what all tools you will use to do that, you collect some data, do some analysis, data analysis, interpret it, and then finalize the results. So this is broadly the method. It may vary from subject to subject, but broadly this is what it is. Now for younger children in primary, it can be made age appropriate by saying that okay, a primary student cannot go on the internet to search for information because we don't know what all information they will find, will it be age appropriate or not. So there are two ways this can be done. One is guided reading or resources. So the teacher provides some age appropriate resource.
Correct.
This age appropriate resource can be built or shared by either the English teachers. So one can have a discussion with the English teachers about what all novels they are reading, if there is literature or whatever they are doing in the literary classroom. So then the children will probably have to identify certain data points from the given source itself.
Okay.
Now this identification can be made as visually appealing as possible.
Right.
It can be made even physically. This thing that I have, one research task is identify key information. So it can also be like a treasure hunt. That I have hidden clues somewhere, or something is right there, and I have given some prompt, and the children have to collect everything and make sense of it. So such innovative tasks, these are available on all the teacher websites, innovative tasks. But the idea is first I have identified the goal. So the goal is that the child is not searching for new information. The information is provided. They only have to identify and assimilate assimilate that information in some logical manner.
Correct.
So the crux of this being that first identify the end goal. So if my end goal is that by grade 8 the child is able to search for information online from reliable sources, what will it look like for a primary child? So primary student, it would be first I am able to read a source, identify information which is relevant for me, then probably by grade 3 they should know the difference between a reliable source, like basic concepts of reliability.
Correct.
Whether the author name is there, whether the site is .com site or .org, basic things.
Right.
And from there then you take it forward. So the idea is the vertical alignment.
Correct.
So identify the skills, align vertically, also considering what they are doing in other subjects.
Right.
So if in maths they have just started addition, so probably data analysis would be something like, okay, I found these two, in my treasure hunt I found these two datas, now what do I do with it? Then you ask the maths teacher to help them with that.
Right. So it has to be a very blended approach where teachers from different subjects, they have to come together, and I guess that is the purpose of global perspective, because it's not based out of topics, it's based out of skills, and those skills will be used and are being used in different subjects as well.
So it's very simple. If again for a first time teacher, just following the Bloom's taxonomy is enough.
Right.
Like identify, understand, explain,
Right.
analyze. For younger children we say differentiate, identify
Right.
two differences, compare, contrast.
Right.
Evaluation comes much later.
Correct.
So for a first time teacher, just following the Bloom's taxonomy helps.
Right. And I guess this is the right time to also to speak about it. Although we will be talking about resource utilization and lesson planning later on, but as Dr. Ritu also mentioned, all these terms which are very important in primary, at primary level, the books, the Collins Global Perspective, in these books you have those terms mentioned for the students. For the teachers, in the teacher's guide it's mentioned that this is the way you need to take. There are lesson plans which are provided to you, there are detailed specific lessons plans which are provided to you, and we will be talking about that in our the segment of resource utilization, lesson planning. But yeah, just because we were talking about this, I thought that it's very important to tell that Collins books of Global Perspective, they're already following this, because we understand the subject comes with a lot of challenges, and to provide teachers with the maximum assistance. So we spoke about primary, Global Perspective for primary, and this is something which I often keep on reading in the WhatsApp groups. IGCSE,
Yeah.
Global Perspectives, so many questions, and I'm sure our live viewers are also very patiently waiting for you to answer the questions related to IGCSE, because this is as we call the time where teachers are on their toes for the IGCSE. So we do have a question. So for students, very important questions for students transitioning to IGCSE, how can we or teachers gradually build skills to help them ace their IGCSE level, especially when it comes to individual report writing using primary data?
Okay, so so when we talk about the vertical planning, this is relevant from so if the school has ASA levels or not IGCSE, Cambridge has provided all the resources.
Correct.
So all we need to do is just pick up the mark scheme. So there are three resources which Cambridge provides. One is the syllabus, which has all the assessment objectives. Second is the mark scheme for each component. So for individual research also there is a mark scheme. Third are the specimen papers which are marked by examiners, so the examiner comments are there, and then the examiner report is also published. So as teachers, the primary responsibility or the first step would be to gather all these four resources and identify the common strands,
Right.
which will help me identify which skill, so just to segregate the various skills, and under each skill what are the requirement. I'll
Correct.
take a very simple example of source analysis.
Yeah, if you could just
Yeah.
share an example, that would actually help the teachers a lot.
So a very simple example of source analysis. So source analysis, in the syllabus it says candidate is able, the assessment objective is evaluate, analyze various sources.
Correct, yeah.
However, in the mark scheme, it looks very different. In the mark scheme, they have to analyze author, the purpose, the bias,
Absolutely.
primary sources, secondary sources, research methods used, all of those things are there. So now I know that if I have to address this assessment objective in my lesson, so my lesson target comes from the assessment objective. So if I have to do this, then these are the points I have to cover. So probably author, analyzing and evaluating author and purpose would take probably one lesson, bias would probably take another lesson. So now I have a lesson wise division of skills within source analysis. Then I will look at examiner comments to see to achieve the highest level in this particular skill, what is the expectation.
Right. Yeah, very important.
So the examiner comments, the examiner report clearly mentions,
Right.
it clearly mentions to students who are able to explain, identify and explain bias are more likely to achieve
Yeah.
high level marks.
That is something our next segment is
Yes.
actually assessment and evaluation,
Yeah.
which will be covering. Yeah.
So usually what we do is we take all the four documents, the syllabus, the mark scheme, the specimen paper with the comments and the examiner report, and then we highlight these strands.
Right.
So we usually color code it.
Right.
So we say, okay, source analysis, wherever I can find any link with the source analysis, I'll highlight it as blue. Then I'll bring all of those blue highlighted parts in my unit plan. So my one unit plan on source analysis and all these things need to be covered. Answering the earlier question, I can take the same thing to a middle grade or a primary level,
grade, yeah.
because then I will open my Cambridge support hub.
Yeah.
I will go to the learning objective for grade 8, stage 9, stage 8, stage 7, the learning objectives are there. For stage 6, source analysis learning objective says student is able to analyze author and purpose, that's it.
Right.
Only author and purpose, that's it. By the time they are in grade 8, the learning objective says author, purpose as well as bias. IGCSE just says is able to evaluate wide range of sources. And so now I know what I need to do in each grade level also.
Yeah.
So
you
that
get
is
to,
the key.
And that's like gradually they also prepare, they also get prepared.
The one good thing in Collins' book is that Collins has already done that for us.
Yeah.
So what we do is, so if I take the IGCSE book, it already has in the checklist
mentioned.
It is already mentioned in the checklist, whereas the lower grades checklist will have only that much which is required for them.
Right. And that's what we keep on saying, like in terms of the CIE, they have, like as Dr. Ritu also mentioned, that in terms of may that be marking scheme, may that be examiner report, the way, I mean that works as a Bible, the CIE, their website, all the information are provided over there. So the schools who are planning to adopt global perspective, first time teachers, as Dr. Ritu also mentioned, those are the documents which you need to download. And ma'am also gave a wonderful example, that color coding, highlighting it, that would actually make it very easy. And although the Collins books have everything, but to make the examiner report, the marking scheme be compatible with the Collins book, that's something which should be used as a Bible with the CIE, all the documents which we have. So as ma'am has already mentioned, in terms of the examiner reports, I guess this is the best time to start a discussion on assessment and evaluation. Now this is like a question also came over here, and assessment becomes slightly tricky for global perspective because it's extremely subjective, there's no objectivity to it. So at times teachers find it difficult to assess, B, evaluate. So, and I guess that's the preface of the question, that what are some of the best methods to assess students' understanding of GP across different grade levels? So let's start with primary. Let's start with primary, that how do you suggest teachers who are teaching primary students GP, how do you suggest them to assess and evaluate students? And then we come to lower secondary and IGCSE. We already know, we have already mentioned, but again we'll still speak about that. So for primary school, how do you suggest teachers to assess students and evaluate students on CIE Global Perspective?
So primary, again, those who are primary grade teachers, they already know that more focus nowadays is on literacy, numeracy, skills, and probably not writing,
Right.
because writing is introduced later. So for pre-primary and primary children, the focus should be on creative tasks. However, those tasks also need to be based on some rubric.
Correct.
The rubric key items or the criteria come from what we have just discussed, that we then vertically align and we break the final target down into smaller points. So some very good ways of assessing primary children in global perspectives would be, for example, are they able to articulate simple questions for an interview?
Okay. For an interview.
For an interview. So suppose I am doing something on sustainability with my primary children.
Okay.
And one of the skills I want to teach them is about primary data collection.
Okay.
However, I cannot use the word primary data collection in primary grade because obviously the terminology is not age appropriate. So probably I'll tell them that, one source of information are people who have experienced that problem.
Correct.
Then I'll ask the children, can you frame 2 or 3 questions which you will want to ask another person about sustainability or about pollution or whatever topic they are doing in the class, whichever theme they are doing. Simple questions, so we know there are different types of questions.
Right.
So the most basic is inch, foot and yard questions.
Right.
Yeah. So the 4 W's, the how and those questions. So I'll begin with those. So very simple rubric. The child is able to structure the questions. That is the first one. Second is the questions are giving will give relevant responses related to the topic.
Okay.
So if I am doing a project on how much garbage is there in my generated in my society, the child should be able to ask simple 2 or 3 questions about whether whoever they are asking, that what is the amount of garbage generated in their household every day and how do they dispose of the garbage. So this is a very simple example of how a very small rubric with only 2 or 3 criteria around this research, very small step of asking questions in interview. Another very unique technique can be observation.
Right.
So usually as teachers, we have this perception that assessment can only be either written or verbal.
Right.
However, assessment in primary grades is also observation based. For example, collaboration. Is the child able to work with some other child to provide a solution or complete the task? This is mostly based on teacher observation. The good thing in GP is that in IGCSE, they already have a criteria on that in the team project. So teachers can again make a very simple rubric, unpack that rubric with children, that you have to work with your friend, you will be given half an hour and you have to make this, whatever they are making. They can be making a card, they can be writing a simple letter. If they are in grade 3, 4, they can write simple letters, small letters. So simple. This actually may seem a bit unconventional because the amount of planning that has to go into observation based assessments is immense. Because every teacher's perception may be different. So to bring all of them to have a fair criteria for all the children, so a lot of planning and understanding between the teachers should happen first.
And I guess and this is something I'm speaking from personal experience. How much do you suggest or recommend? Because at times, global perspective as a subject is treated in a manner where the school don't make it mandatory for assessments, because they make it other subjects they have assessments, but for global perspective they don't have assessments. When I say assessments, I mean to say like the traditional way of assessing. So how much do you suggest or recommend the school management over here who are there, who are viewing our webinar, or even the teachers, that how important is it to assess in, as you mentioned, in not such conventional manner, but assessing and evaluating, how important is it?
So again, those who are first time teachers, they may find it a bit different, but those who have been teaching for long, they would know that there are two approaches towards assessment. One is assessment for learning, which means that I am assessing very frequently the skills that the child has learned, developed, and whether the child is able to apply those skills in the real life situation, in classroom situation or outside or whatever, wherever that skill is relevant. So whether they are able to do that or not. If I find some gap, then immediately in my next lesson plan or my next unit plan, I'll try to address that gap. So that is assessment for learning, which are usually called formative assessments. In GP or any skill-based sub, not only GP, but even in languages. If I'm a language teacher and I don't know what level my child is at in, say, speaking. And I am assuming that I have taught them all about speaking, but my child is unable to speak even a word of French or Spanish or Hindi or whichever language, it defeats the purpose.
Correct, absolutely.
So these frequent assessments are absolutely necessary, because they not only inform us about the student level, but they also inform us about how I should plan my next lesson.
Correct.
How to bridge that gap, what support to provide to children. Where are my learners? Where are my different cohorts
what
at?
Level,
however, the more conventional style of assessment which you spoke about are the assessment of learning. When a big chunk of unit is over or many skills are now over, now finally I want to know if my child has been able to, the student is able to perform as per the expected standards. After a summative assessment, I may, as a teacher, I may or I may not have the opportunity to give support and do something on that. Now, summative assessments is a debatable topic all over. Which grade should it start from? However, in most schools, summative assessments do start in middle grades. They start grade 4 or 5 onwards. Because we have to assess what the child, before moving on to the next unit or the next grade. So yes, formative assessments are absolutely essential even in GP, because it is a skill-based subject, just like maths, just like science, just like language. However, summative assessments may depend on the school policy, on the type of cohort, because summative assessments are usually dependent on how the school approaches the whole exam thing.
And like you also mentioned, regular assessments, like in a Collins books, if you refer to the Collins books, over there the kind of assessments you're talking about, the kind of unconventional, where it's more in terms of team, how the student is coping with collaboration or communication, that's something for every chapter is being covered very nicely, which we'll talk about. Now this is extremely important, because a teacher also asked that there have been some updates to the exam pattern for component 2 and 3. So can you just like walk us through what are these changes as compared to the last year?
So as I shared earlier, that Cambridge revises the syllabus completely every 5 years, and there are minor changes every 2 years. So this was the year 2025 when the syllabus was revised. Students are writing for the first time this changed syllabus. All the 3 components have major changes. The first major change is in the written component. In the written component, from source analysis, they have shifted to research analysis. So now they are more research focused. They are trying to build the skills of research, specifically research methods from a young age on. Earlier, focus on research methods was not, the percentage was not that high. So that is the first change, which means that as teachers, when we plan the lessons, we have to focus more on different research methods rather than focusing just on different source types. That is the first change. The second change is In the written component, they have introduced logical fallacies like generalizations. So earlier they used to focus only on type of information like facts, opinion, value,
Right.
judgments. Now they have started asking questions about generalizations or other types of biases and
Right.
fallacies. The solutions question, which is the bone of contention for many people because it is the lengthiest.
Yeah.
So earlier it was a 24 marker, now it is a 20 marker. And fortunately, they have increased the time.
Okay.
So earlier it was 75 minutes, now it's 1 hour, 25 minutes.
They've reduced the marks
Yes.
from 24 to 20. It has
Yeah.
gone.
However, the marks, those marks are redistributed elsewhere.
Yeah.
So the total marks remain 70. However, the time limit has increased, and from the mark scheme purview, more focus is now on research methods and
Correct.
different perspectives.
Right.
In the individual research report, this will also answer the earlier question of how to help learners collect primary data for individual research. So I want to clarify, it is not mandatory for children to collect primary data for individual research.
Right.
Individual research, because they have to include minimum 2 perspectives, global and national or local, either one of them. So usually they do secondary data collection only. They go to reliable sources and they do that. So in the IR, now the focus is more on explaining which perspective they have chosen. So if it is a global perspective, clearly identifying what the perspective is and why they think it is global or national, which means more focus is now on students' own analysis rather than just stating of data and facts from other resources. As more schools are offering GP and in the middle grades also, the bibliography citation skill is evolving more and more. So now probably a little bit more focus on proper correct citation formats, bibliography, references, footnotes, all of those things. In the team project has a major change because the weightage and marks have been completely changed. So earlier it was only 10 marks for the team element. So now it's 25 marks for the team element and 45 marks for the individual reflective paper.
Okay.
And the team element now has a component for individual collaboration points also.
Individual collaboration points.
Which means that if there are 5 people in a team, so there is one criteria, collaborative criteria, they'll get the same marks. However, there are individual marks also.
How much are they contributing to the group? Okay.
Which is based on teacher observation.
Right. Yeah.
Which means earlier many teams face challenges, teachers also face challenges that only few children are working, someone is not contributing.
Correct.
So now that can be addressed.
Yeah, which is great.
Yeah.
Because we do see that a lot in the classroom.
Yes.
Wonderful. And also please, if you have any other questions, we have 2 other elements to cover, but if you have any questions, please write that down. Please share it with us on the comment section. We will be taking those questions towards the end of this webinar. So please keep your questions coming. Now the comes that, okay, everything is good, but resources. Now that's so important. Resource utilization and lesson planning, because that's where teachers struggle a lot. Whatever we discuss, that's something which, like, if there's a good resource, most of the problems or most of the challenges are solved with a good resource. So, and we will be talking about that. And there's a teacher who asked that they have been using Collins books. And so this question is specifically for grade 6, 7 and 8. How can Collins books for grade 6, 7 and 8 be effectively used to teach global perspective?
Yes, so this is again a very interesting question because Collins books already provide the case studies.
Which we mentioned,
along with those tasks. So those tasks are also formative, and then at the end of the unit they're also summative, like question answer exam style questions with the criteria and reflection and everything. However, the teacher, depending on the cohort and the situation, may want to do a different case study for the same skill. As a rule of thumb, just as a rule of thumb, there are many resources available,
Correct.
but as a rule of thumb, what GP teachers can do is enroll in the Nat Geo resource. So there is a separate teachers resource in Nat Geo. It's free of cost. You can just subscribe. So Nat Geo, obviously, because it's related to biodiversity, climate, and all of those. So all those topics, case studies, what is currently happening in different parts of the world, not only qualitative information in the form of testimonies and case studies, but also awesome documentaries,
Okay.
but also quantitative data about different countries, comparison, all of that is available there. Then for economic issues, there's World Bank and IMF. Again, we can subscribe and they keep sending newsletters. So World Bank sends monthly newsletters about issues they are now addressing, which are also again very helpful for teachers to use
absolutely.
as case studies. Then we have all the UN subgroups. So
yeah.
we have UNESCO, UNICEF, UN Women, UN Security Council. Then we have the UN Energy.
Which they are very active.
Yes.
They keep on posting.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they have a separate student section as well as a separate teachers, educators section. So all of these subscriptions help us keep updated as teachers.
What's happening around the world.
And ready-made case studies and age appropriate also. Then we have Discovery Channel, obviously. So these are some of the global sources. Some of the national sources are like Niti Aayog has very good sources.
Right.
NCRT has very good sources on their website. They have case studies and all of those things. But again, my suggestion would be using the book as an entry point. So use the book as an entry point, use those case studies as a hook, get the topic started, and then branch out into these various topics.
Absolutely. And that could also be like all the Nat Geo. I mean, I've actually used a lot of Nat Geo films in my classroom. They could be a wonderful starting point where students get to understand. And then when you have to make them do the work, the worksheets and all, and that's where you come to Colin's book, because this could be also for a student when they watch a film, visually it's so appealing, all of these things. And as you said that they're beautifully made. I mean, I use a lot of New York Times because they have like wonderful opinion pieces, they have wonderful short videos, and we are also planning, like, this is too soon to be talking about it, but
so BBC World is a very good source, and when we start using these, then we can compare how a particular issue is addressed in Nat Geo versus how it is addressed in BBC World versus an Indian source. Guardian is again a very good this thing. And then skills like different perspectives, like source analysis, all of those become so interesting for the children.
But, I mean, at the end of the day, teachers also have to do a bit of research. They will have to get into the internet. They'll have to see what is appropriate for the child. And so along with students practicing all of these skills, I guess like teachers have also what we say, like you have to preach what you teach. And you have actually already answered this question, but still, because we had selected this question and resource utilization, lesson planning, what are the best resources in terms of websites, worksheet, reports, survey and videos to make GP lessons more engaging and insightful? We've already mentioned what we'll do. We'll also, if possible, we'll also share some links. As we will be sharing your certificates, we will be sharing some links after we'll get more suggestions from Dr. Ritu. Will share more links for the teachers who want to use these resources. But as Dr. Ritu also mentioned, these resources are widely available on the internet. So all you have to do is do a bit of research, and you will be able to access these resources. And I guess most of these resources are subscription based, but free of cost.
They are free of cost. All of them are free of cost. And again, I would reiterate what I said initially, that they use your core subject as your strength. So if whatever is my core subject, I would already have many case studies in my own case subject, core subject. So I remember one of my GP teachers using an English story that children were reading, the very famous one about trees being cut down, the Lorax. So they use that as an entry point into sustainability, because children were doing it
Right.
in English. And then there's this wonderful movie which again young children like a lot. I remember one of my history teachers using World War I and Indian independence movement as an entry point into human rights.
Okay.
So again, teachers should use their own core subject as an entry point, and then they can branch out into different
Absolutely.
areas.
Yeah, and rightly you also mentioned films, which is again a wonderful entry point. Now we'll come to some practical challenges and solution, because rightly initially you also mentioned that it's very important for the students to observe, like you also mentioned the activity which you were making them do. So I guess these 2 or 3 questions are directed towards the practical challenges what schools or teachers face, because a lot of, like, in terms of at times with field work, at times of how can teachers effectively manage team project when collecting evidence outside of school, which is slightly challenging for a lot of schools?
Yes. So different schools approach team project outside of school in different manners depending on their own school policy. So some schools like to arrange for the field work and everything as a school process. So which means that the teachers and the staff are scaffolding all of those. They are directing everything and controlling the situation. So it is a much more controlled environment. Some schools ask children to go for team project to various NGOs or wherever they are going on their own, with probably their parents or maybe some other adults, which means then it is a bit of an uncontrolled environment where as teachers we cannot sort of do anything. However, in both these situations, before going for fieldwork, before approaching any person for interview, before going for any observation, for any of those, it's very essential to establish fieldwork ethics for children. So fieldwork ethics is a skill which is explicitly not mentioned anyway. However, again, if we look at the mark scheme for research analysis question in written component, one of the criteria is that consent was taken for the interview. And in the criteria, there was no disturbance when the interview was happening. So when we are collating the lesson plan, we are picking up these criteria, then as a teacher, I know that, okay, this is something I have to teach children. I have to teach children that when they go to take an interview, they have to take consent and whatever fieldwork ethics have to be done. How can it be scaffolded? This has to be built as a skill. Fieldwork ethics is a skill that has to be built up in lessons before children go out into the field. So that they follow all of those norms. And then when they go out into the fieldwork, always give some structured task sheet to them so that they are engaged in observing and filling that task sheet rather than just sort of going and enjoying the situation like that. So planning, perceiving and delivering fieldwork ethics like a skill, and structure during the fieldwork, where students are engaged in doing something actively rather than just going and enjoying. So these 3 things are key in managing fieldwork effectively.
Which is very important. I guess that was a very important point. Since I guess one of the last question which we had was very important in terms of the AI intervention, like global perspective as subject, how can it work well with the growing AI?
So teachers can actually use AI for their benefit. As I said, that if I'm using my own core subject or my own passion as an entry point into the lesson, then I can actually take a resource, put it on ChatGPT or whichever AI I am using platform, and ask it to rewrite the source at an age appropriate level. If for assessment, suppose I am taking a formative assessment, I want a creative way of analyzing are children able to identify different perspectives or not. So probably using a cartoon strip. So there are different AI tools. So there's something known as, I'm forgetting the name, but it generates a poster, ready-made poster, colorful posters. So I can give a cue to it and it can generate cartoons for me, and which I can use for different perspectives. So AI can be used extensively in lesson planning. And apart from that, making children aware about the ethical use of AI.
Which is very important.
Because now we cannot go back, we cannot regress towards a date where there was no AI. AI is here to stay. Children will use it, but again, like we have taught them about citations and bibliography, the same way we teach them about ethical use of AI.
Absolutely. And which will actually branch out to different subjects also, because they might be using. So we do have questions, just because of we don't have a lot of time, so we were able to filter out 3 questions. I was just reading out, and some of them actually have already answered. But this is a question from Mr. Gagan Pradhan. Are we supposed to follow each and every topic of the book, or a teacher may be selective in choosing the topics?
Yeah, so the 22 topics are given sort of like a guidance in the syllabus. It is not mandatory to address each and every topic in the lesson, because in one academic year it's impossible to do all the 22 topics. However, because international IGCSE is a 2-year course, you may try and address as many of them as possible. However, it is not mandatory. So what can be done is you can vertically align these topics. So for example, sustainability is something that can be very easily done in grade 5 and 6, and then we stop there, because it's a spiraling curriculum. We keep coming back to the same skills and same topics. Then maybe because we look at the horizontal alignment also. So then in grade 7 and 8, when they are starting to learn about civics and citizen rights and democracy and types of government, then you can introduce human rights, and so you can vertically align the topics, so that students somewhere in their Cambridge journey have touched upon those topics.
And also because those 22 topics are so wide, like in terms of it's actually literally covering each and every aspect. And I guess it would be also the right time to tell that, completing the topics are not a priority.
Completing the topic,
skills which is more important.
So we never ever plan a lesson which is topic oriented. The lesson plans are always skill based.
I guess that's the beauty.
It's also the reverse. There is never ever a lesson which is about a skill in isolation. Skill is always embedded in a topic.
Has to be, otherwise it's just tool. So we have a question from DPS International, Bangalore North. So for primary kids, it's very difficult to relate national and global perspective. How do we connect to make them understand easily? So I guess that's trying.
So again, the vertical alignment, when we open the syllabus, the assessment objective, examiner report and everything, so we can clearly identify there are different perspective. Skill is broken down into smaller skills. One of the smaller skills is what is the perspective. So for younger children, it is important to understand what is a perspective. So in simpler terms, it is someone's opinion supported by a reason or an evidence. So for primary children, are they able to differentiate between a fact and an opinion? If it is an opinion, whose opinion is it? If it is this person's opinion, is it applicable only to me, or maybe other people living in other countries or from other different backgrounds? So breaking down that skill is important. So yes, it can be difficult for them to understand global perspective and national. However, starting, taking those smaller steps, differentiate between fact and opinion. Once the child is able to do that, whose opinion is it? What is the opinion? Is it in favor? Is it against? What is the opinion? How many people may follow this opinion? And then tell them about global and national.
Absolutely. And we have another question from Madhuvati. I guess this is something which we have covered, but if you want to add something on what you have already covered, that kindly give us an insight on how assessment is done in GP in primary years, which you have already covered. But
so again, in primary years, we can have a mixture of written, oral and observation based assessment. So written assessments very similar to the English assessments, like fill in the blanks, true and false, identify pictures, match the following, all of those things. Underline, give a source, they can underline the key.
I'm so sorry, which is actually there in Collins' book.
Is
everything is there in terms of which you can use. Sorry, please.
And so these are the written ones. Oral assessments, when they can come and share, like I shared this example of, just taking an interview. So the child just taking an interview. You can call one expert in the room, and then the children one by one can come, and they can be a role play sort of a thing. That can be an assessment. And finally, there's the teacher observation, where they are assessing collaboration, communication and all of those things.
Great. I guess we don't have enough time, but there were a lot of other questions. But before ending this webinar, and first of all, like, thank you so much for all of you for joining. But I would ask this question on a more personal level: that for how long have you been teaching Global Perspective, Dr. Ritu?
7 years now.
But you have been teaching for 20. You have been.
I have been in academy. I'm an academician, I have been teaching for the last 20 years.
Correct.
Earlier, I was in a university, and then I shifted to my current position. The fun fact is,
Yeah, my question is
Yeah.
that. My question is that because it's such a new subject, global
Yes.
perspective. So I just want you to either tell or suggest or recommend the teachers who are still slightly hesitant about taking global perspective as a subject. In your experience of the last 8 years, and when I going back to the last 10 years when you had no idea about a subject like global perspective, and now looking back after 8 years, how as an individual, how you think as an individual and as a teacher, how do you think personally you have evolved as an individual, as a teacher after teaching 8 years of global perspective?
yeah. So, yes, you are very right. I had no idea that there is a subject called GP. I had joined as some other, my core subject is something else.
Correct.
However, the key again is, see, all teachers, I know all teachers are very passionate about their own subjects.
Right.
They have very good foundational knowledge about their own subjects. Try and identify those linkages. Because in GP, all those skills, the issues, the topics, there's something for everyone.
Everyone, yeah,
There's something
absolutely.
for everyone. Just identify that, map it horizontally with your own subject, and just, I would say, just take the dive.
Yeah.
And begin with it. The most fulfilling part of a GP teacher is, the most fulfilling aspect is that children may or may not one day forget the content. They may change their subject choices in senior school, they may take different subjects in colleges, however the skills will remain with them
absolutely.
forever.
Yeah.
And that is what parents also appreciate a lot when they see, when we have these project culminations, when we have these presentations. Parents, obviously they also realize these are young children,
Right.
but parents are amazed, the external experts are amazed by the communication skills of
Yeah.
these children. So that is the most fulfilling part.
And I guess also at the same time, just them becoming slightly more active citizens of the
Yes.
society. Like you already mentioned, they understand different perspectives, and once you understand different perspective, you might not always agree with their perspective, but you agree for them having a perspective. And that's the bedrock of global perspective, having diverse perspective, and you being okay with disagreeing with their perspective, but not disagreeing with them having a perspective, which is very important.
So it's in a nutshell, because Cambridge or IB or CBSE or whichever board
Yeah.
a school is following, the approach is, or the aim is, to create independent learners in the
Absolutely,
end. So
yeah.
independent learners is when students know how they learn. They know their own skills, and they know, again, metacognition, reflection, how they learn. That is the ultimate aim.
Right.
Because in today's information age, content is everywhere. Children know more content than teachers.
We do, yeah, absolutely.
So content focus will not take
Overflow,
us
yeah.
so far along. Skill focus is
What
what
we
is
do
required.
with that content, right?
And again, as you said, international mindedness, a good citizenship,
Right.
all of those things are something that are the need of the hour.
Correct,
and all
absolutely.
the boards recognize that, all the governments recognize that, UN recognizes
Right,
that.
absolutely.
And then in the end, as a GP teacher, I know that somewhere I am able to make a difference.
Absolutely. That's a wonderful note to just make a difference. And I guess if you have liked this conversation with Dr. Ritu, we plan to have much more such conversations on global perspective, on different subjects, on education, the future of education. So please keep following us, keep following our Facebook page, our Instagram page, keep share, subscribe our page. And if you have any requests, do write to us. Collins books are available, Global Perspective books are available, and as we have just discussed that what are the benefits of the book. So if you have any queries, any requirement, please write to us. And thank you so much for joining today, and thank you so much, Dr. Ritu, for taking out time. I know today you just came from school.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us. If you just want to say something, and we'll just
I
wrap
think
it up.
that is it. The GP gives us a very unique platform which maybe other boards may not provide,
Right.
to follow, even for the teacher to follow their own passion.
Right.
So I, as a teacher, if I'm passionate about few topics, I can transfer the same passion to my students. So on that note, I'll just thank you, Nikhil, and Collins, for having me here, and a lot of encouragement and motivation to young GP teachers, first time teachers and existing teachers to keep exploring, keep encouraging children to take GP. If it is not mandatory in your schools, force the management, make it mandatory. It truly does help.
Yeah,
it truly does
absolutely.
help. Thank you.
Thank you so much.